Hi, good afternoon. It's the 4th of April, 3 o'clock, and thank you for tuning in to the Wellspringers Wednesdays. I hope you had a lovely Easter. I hope you are enjoying a wonderful Passover. It's supposed to snow in DC this weekend, which is insane. The cherry blossoms are blooming today and tomorrow, so hopefully it will not snow. It's been a crazy spring with crazy weather. It snowed in New York, I think, on Monday. So just like last year, thanks to climate change, I guess. That's kind of what it's like living with an illness. But let's get into it. Today's show is on springtime and how we can bloom even when we're sick. So this is a weekly show where I share insights and strategies and resources so that you can have ease despite disease. I'm a yoga therapist and a writer. I am a lifestyle redesigner so that you can have more meaning in your life, feel more peace, and feel more beautiful despite your illness, whatever chronic illness that you're living with. So today's topic, I think, is particularly poignant as the world is waking up around us, and what that can mean when we feel that our whole life is a slumber. So I want to start first with two poems, two great poems of the English language that both mention April in their opening lines. The first one is by Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales, which I've never read in full. I've obviously read parts of it, and I've enjoyed a BBC series about it. But the first four lines are this, so I just want to share it with you. When in April the sweet showers fall, that pierce March's drought to the root and all, and bathe every vein in liquor that has power to generate therein, and sire the flower. So this talks about, obviously, the power of this season, the creation of this season, as they talk about siring the flower. And it's generally uplifting. We talk about bathing too, and refreshing, I guess, in that sense, and the sweetness of this time of year. The other poem is interesting and also an English classic. It's from The Wasteland, the opening lines of The Wasteland, by T.S. Eliot. Also, someone who lived in England. He was born, I think, in St. Louis, but became a British citizen. So his opening lines are, April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. So why would April be cruel? Maybe when it snows the first week of April, perhaps. But I think for me, what he was talking about is that when the whole world is waking up around you and you're not on that train, the contrast between the season and what's going on and what is going on with you personally in your own life can be sharper, harder, and more piercing. It's easier when everybody is in hibernation and living inside to feel like you're like that when you're sick, because everybody's doing it. But as other people are starting to do their spring cleaning and to reboot their exercise program and do all sorts of other things outside, and you're stuck inside, that can be really, really hard. So I'm very grateful to T.S. Eliot for acknowledging that. Not everybody sees the springtime as an easy time. But I do think that there are ways that we can look at it by going back to the original meaning of spring that can still have application to us who are sick and stuck in bed and can't reboot that exercise program and don't have the energy to do the spring cleaning that we want. So stay tuned to the end, because I have 5 specific tips for things that you can adapt into your lives and ways of being and thinking to help you to flourish and bloom in this season. So stay tuned to the end, and we'll get to those. They're related to the 5 ways that I see spring. So the first one is spring is origin. So the spring is like the beginning of things, is where the water starts, where it bursts up from the earth. The new year used to start in March. It's why September, October, November, December are named after the Latin roots for 7, 8, 9, and 10, because they used to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th month of the year, because the springtime was the beginning of the year. Meditation taught me that we can always begin again, even if it's not the springtime. When your mind gets distracted and starts to wander, as soon as you notice that, you bring it back to your attention, back to your breath, or back to your mantra, or back to your icon, or whatever it is that you're focusing on for your meditation, and you can start all over again. Everything that went before doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that you got distracted and your monkey mind took off through the jungle for 5 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. So that's very, very helpful to think about and to embrace, and know that we can always start again, no matter how long we've been sick, or how long we've been angry, or how long we've been miserable, that we can shift at any time. There's also a great book by one of my teachers. I don't know her personally, but my own teacher told me about her, Pema Chodron, which is a book called Start Where You Are, A Guide to Compassionate Living. And it basically talks about how, no matter how decrepit we feel, no matter how we've been, with kindness towards ourselves especially, we can always begin again. So for me this spring, I'm going to begin again, trying to have a more consistent bedtime. I'm doing another food cleanse starting this Friday. And I'm also trying to reach out to friends more consistently. So think about ways in your own life that you can begin again, how you can restart or reboot your origin story. So that's number 1. Number 2, I love all of these. Spring is flexibility. So think about a bed and bed springs, that when you lie down on it, you leave an impression, but when you get up, it springs back to the way that it was, your bed. So spring also so then to me, spring encompasses a sort of malleability, where when you have a force that comes at you, you sort of bend with it, work with it, and then when it leaves, you go back to the way that you want, the way that you were. My illness is a power like gravity that has me bedridden for weeks, and that is unpredictable. It comes when it wants and it leaves when it wants. I don't have any control over that, but I can stay nimble in response to it and adapt to that force coming at me, and know that I can be buoyant and spring back once that force decides to leave. And if I keep that in mind and remember that, that's really helpful. One of the same yoga teacher who told me about Pema Chodron, Cindy Lee, very wise woman, she also would use the image of a tree in a storm, and that a tree that is juicy and flexible and able to bend in the wind doesn't break in the hurricane. The ones that are rigid, and the ones that are dry, and the ones that can't adapt are the ones that break. So try to be like that tree that can bend in the wind and survive. The next one is spring as creativity. So obviously this is a time of creation all around us, right? Last spring at the Hirshhorn, there was a neat exhibit by this Japanese artist called Yahoo Kasuma. You may have seen it on your Instagram feed. I think it was then out in LA. And she's mostly known for creating these rooms that feel like eternity, because these dots, these polka dots, go on and on and on and on. And one of the things that I learned from visiting that exhibit was that she herself had physical limitations, and that the use of mirrors in her work was something that arose directly out of those physical limitations. She physically did not have the energy to manifest her vision of all these dots. So she used mirrors in order to extend and to magnify what effort she did have, what energy she did have, what she did create. And I love that. This is exactly what the curator wrote. In response to the labor intensity of this work, she, Kasuma, started to utilize mirrors to achieve a similar repetition. The reflective surfaces allowed her to transcend the physical limitations of her own productivity. And I think in the same way, we too can utilize innovation to create workarounds about workarounds our limitations, and to extend and to magnify what efforts we do have. Just because we don't have energy or ability to create the way that we used to doesn't mean we can't create at all. I don't believe. I refuse to believe that. In fact, in some ways, having this boundary or limit or constraint can force us to become more creative and more innovative as we figure out ways to work around or work with whatever those constraints, limitations, obstacles are, just like she did. To her great benefit. It was a wonderful idea and a great innovation. And if we're lucky, we'll have a muse strike and they'll help us in our own way. For me, for example, with cooking, constantly struggling to get a meal. And I finally came up with the idea of, maybe this is not like on the level of her mirrors to extend her polka dots, but I was finally figured out that I needed to create and batch cook meals when I was feeling well, when I was feeling able. To do a shake in the morning and do a double batch, so I could put a second serving in the fridge. So that I'm not that determined skipper trying to muscle my way through, but instead a creative chef making whatever I can with what I have, what's currently in the fridge right now. So if I think of it that way, my life as being a creative chef, then I feel like it sets me up for success, because I'm not going to be able to change the weather. I can't change my illness. I can't change the symptoms, but I can create something nice, workable, maybe even magnificent out of the ingredients in my refrigerator, or out of the ingredients that are in my life as they are right now. So that's number 3. Number 4 is spring as growth. Things grow in the springtime. Plants grow higher. Humans grow the same time all the time, but I love spring because it encourages me to grow in the ways that the plants are growing and thrusting out of the earth, and the flowers as well. Here's another example. When I was learning how to teach yoga, we were taught about gravity, obviously, and how gravity moves through the body in inversions. And again, like with the bed, like with illness, gravity is an immovable force, right? It's there. You have to figure out how to work with it in your inversions. And the way that was suggested, which I loved because I'm a dancer as well, is that we dance with gravity. And if you look at somebody doing a handstand, their fingers are literally moving like they're playing the piano, because they're responding to the way gravity is moving through their body. Hopefully they're stacked, they're flexible, and their bones are stacked, and their bones are doing much more of the work, and they're not muscling their way into the inversion and, you know, counterbalancing and cockeyed all the way through their body, that everything is stacked. But you still dance, and your fingers respond to that. You should watch next time you see somebody do a handstand. That's why I think it's harder to do a handstand on a beach or on a piece of grass, because it's not a flat surface, and so the dance is a little harder because it's not consistent. So when you think of it that way, and you think about partnering with your chronic illness as a dance, and you accept that that's going to be your partner, you want to up-level your skills. Learn your tango. Learn your salsa and your rumba. You can't fight an immovable force. For many of us, our illness is. So you might as well learn how to work with it and become more skillful in dancing with it. Another image I like is that of a surfer riding a wave. A wave is a very powerful force. It can kill you. But if you're skilled and you know how to ride the wave out, you can learn how to navigate that, and maybe even have some fun while you're doing it. You can learn to work to surf the waves of your illness and the tumult. You need to train and rest when you need to and retreat when you need to, duck and weave. But it's not about being strong enough to overcome that force, which, let's be honest, never happens. And then you just end up feeling guilty and shameful that you're so weak. It's not you. You can't overcome this. So don't try to be strong. Try to be skillful so that you can dance better, so that you can surf better, so that you can work with the force that is coming at you. So that's related to the one before, but here I'm focusing on up-leveling skills so that you can continue to grow, so that you can have meaning and happiness in your life. There's a great quote from Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, which, by the way, is coming to PBS this spring in May. I'm super excited, with Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's daughter playing Jo. Amy March in the book says at one point, "I am not afraid of storms, for I'm learning to sail my ship." And I love that because it acknowledges that you can't avoid storms, just like you can't, avoid the gravity or the waves or your illness. But that you can learn, and that I think learning also keeps the fear at bay. It gives you a sense of agency that you can do something, and that it's not a matter of strength versus weakness, but skill versus not knowing what to do, not knowing how to do, not knowing how to be. Okay, our last one. Spring as source. So, water is a source of nourishment. It's also a symbol of birth and renewal and transformation, which is why water is used in baptisms, to symbolize the change that is happening in your life. And it's a source of that, marking that. We have also this month World Water Day, which works to ensure safe water around the world, which is something many people don't have, so we can't take it for granted. It's one of the reasons why I named my business Wellspring Stones, because I wanted to teach people how to build a good wellspring, a lasting wellspring, one that would last like stones, that we could go back to as a source of nourishment, as a source of renewal, and as a source of rebirth. As many times as we need, we can come back to it. So for me, even on a daily basis, I look for ways to start again. A misty morning doesn't always mean a cloudy day. So I will refresh my sheets Not necessarily wash them, just throw them all back and spray some perfume. You could open a window. You can pour yourself a big pitcher of water and resolve to drink the whole thing. There are many sources of things that can renew you and nourish you, and I encourage you to think about that and to make a list so that you can refer to it as your source. Because springs can do that. And I think it's another wonderful aspect of the meaning of springs. So I just want to encourage you to know that while the world outside comes back to life, we can still find meaning and create a sense of renewal in our lives, no matter what the weather is outside is, and no matter what the barometer inside is. It is possible. So just to review, the 5 tips of things that you can do is 1, you can always begin again. That's a spring is origin. Stay juicy, meaning stay flexible and don't be rigid so that you crack in the storm. 3 is to create a sense of adaptability so that you can be creative and create a great life out of the ingredients in your fridge. 4 is to learn the force, learn the force, like Yoda, and learn how to dance with it, learn how to surf, learn how to cook, up-level the skills that you need to deal with this immovable force in your life. And then finally, lastly, is to refresh your sources, whatever those are. This could be your friendships too. For me, they definitely are. They're definitely a bridge. So, I hope this was helpful today. It was one of my favorite topics. Did not have a good week last week, which is why the dispatch is not out yet for April 1st, but hopefully that will go out tomorrow, probably realistically. Just adapting, staying flexible, honoring what was going on with me over the weekend. Easter basically was non-existent, but it's okay. Today is a good day, and there will be good days again for us, for you. One of the advantages of having been sick for as long as I have is that I know that. And that as bad as it can be, and as bad as the FOMO is, the fear of missing out, there will always be other days when I'm better and when I can create my own wonder that I don't need to worry about missing out on. So I hope you're signed up for the dispatch. I'll put the link below where you can get it. I've got some wonderful things. I've got a wonderful new resource from online on YouTube about cooking healthy and batch cooking, which I mentioned today, Downshiftology. And I have a great podcast that I'm super excited to tell you about, that's a history podcast that brings things from the past into the present. And I'll be talking about this subject as well. So, and the new, I got new screensavers, lock screens. And the themes are birth, gentle, and wishes, and some beautiful images. So I'll be sending those out as well. I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.